In this lecture, we're going to take an in-depth look at insert multi-mesh brushes, how to create our own IMM or insert multi-mesh brushes, as well as how to create curve brushes that insert meshes along a curve. That's both individual meshes and tripart meshes. So let's say we want to insert teeth into the mouth of this creature. So I have here a tooth that I've sculpted and decimated. This is just a mesh with no subdivision levels, and it's 109,000 faces. It's important that it be relatively low res. I want to make an insert mesh from this brush, meaning I can take that and then insert into a model that has no subdivision levels. For example, if I go to the light box, open up a polysphere, delete my lower subdivision levels, I'm able to go to B for brush, I for insert, and I have a variety of insert multi-mesh brushes here. We'll select, let's say, industrial parts. If I select the Phillips head screw, I can click and drag, and that inserts these meshes into this current subtool. They're not separate subtools, they're just part of the mesh. Clear the mask and go into frame mode, you can see that they maintain their polygroups, and they are separate but a single subtool. So we want to create one of these brushes using this tooth. Now, to store a mesh and make it an insert multi-mesh brush, you have to change the orientation so it grows out of the surface at the orientation that you want it to grow from. So for example, if I were to go to Brush, Create, and click Create Insert Mesh, I want to make a new brush. I don't want to append it into this brush. So I've created a new insert mesh brush. If I click and drag, you see it draws out, but it doesn't really draw at the orientation I would want a tooth to grow from. That's because when we create an insert mesh brush, we need to consider the background to be the surface of the model. So what I will do is I will orient the tooth so the background is the surface of the model and it's growing out roots first. So now if we go to Brush and create Insert Mesh Brush, I have the option to create a new one or append it to the existing mesh. I'll go ahead and append it. And now I have two meshes in my Insert Mesh Brush. This one, as you can see, grows out of the surface like this. Now if I want to change the depth it grows from, go to the Brush menu and go to the Depth options and turn the Depth slider down. Now if I click and drag, you see it grows embedded in the surface. So if we return here to our creature, I want to place these teeth inside the mouth. Now, this creature has multiple subdivision levels. So what I do in a case like this is I will go ahead and duplicate this model. I'll just go to duplicate, and I'm going to create a proxy mesh, which is essentially just the mouth area with everything else deleted and no subdivision levels. I'll use that proxy mesh to grow my insert mesh teeth, then delete the proxy mesh and be left with just the teeth as a subtool. So I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to turn on solo mode and step down a couple more subdivision levels. I don't need a lot of detail for this proxy mesh. I'll go to the geometry menu and I will delete lower and delete higher. Then I'm going to hide everything but the mouth area, and I will go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. So this is my proxy mesh. This is just the mouth area. Now I've got my Insert Multi-Mesh Brush of the teeth. I'll click and drag, and that draws the teeth. But you notice that they're sticking out at not quite the right angle. So I'll go to my gizmo for Rotate, and then I'm just going to rotate them and position them, just fine-tune that positioning exactly where I want it. And because insert mesh brushes will automatically mask the rest of the model, I'm able to do that without affecting the proxy mesh. When I'm happy with that, I'll clear the mask, go back to draw mode, and let's draw some more teeth here. We'll draw two teeth right here. Go back to our rotate, scale those down, maybe scale them out a little bit. Clear our mask and go back to draw mode. Now we'll turn off X symmetry because I don't want all the teeth to be perfectly symmetrical. Let's click and drag here. The brush will draw along the surface normal of the face that you click on to begin with. So that's why these are growing out at a better angle, because I'm clicking, as you can see. That one's actually kind of like that slight rotation back. We'll just tweak it a little bit. They're picking up the surface normal of the face that I click on when I draw. Clear the mask, go back to draw mode. Let's select our insert toothbrush again, make sure we have this tooth selected, and then let's click and drag to draw more of these teeth. We'll go back to rotate and just rotate that one down slightly, maybe scale it a little bit. Go back to draw, And we'll keep drawing teeth in this very, very scary open mouth. And we can create interesting rows of teeth, kind of like you get in a shark's mouth, where there's row after row of teeth because they just constantly restore their teeth. They lose teeth and they're constantly growing new ones. Now, if I want to duplicate this particular mesh, I can simply press Control, click and drag, and it duplicates that model. That works for any tool that doesn't have subdivision levels. If you Control, click, and drag on the gizmo, it will duplicate that mesh. So I can actually keep placing this particular tooth in variations here. So back to draw, we'll draw another one right here. Let's draw one right here. Now that one picked up that face normal right there. So let's rotate down and let's draw from here. And then go to rotate and let's rotate this one down. Make sure we get the rotate slider and not scale. There we go. Maybe scale that one down a little bit and scale it in X. And we'll draw another one here. Let's rotate that one and scale it. And you see we're getting this lovely set of terrifying chompers. Now remember, this is a proxy mesh. We're going to delete this mesh at some point. We're just using it as a base that we can draw our teeth into. We'll go back into X symmetry and let's draw a couple more teeth here. As I draw, if I move my brush up and down, I can scale and sort of shear these insert meshes. I can rotate and change their orientation while I'm drawing. Let's draw some more down here. Put some little ones here. Now if I'm happy with that, we'll clear the mask. Now I want to get rid of that proxy mesh, so I simply Control-Shift-Click on the proxy mesh twice to hide it. That leaves the teeth visible, and I go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. So I've now deleted the proxy mesh of the face. If I turn off Solo, there's the original model where I extrapolated my proxy mesh from, and there are the teeth in the mouth. Now, sometimes you might want to insert a mesh along a curve. So let's take a look at how we do that. If we go back to our tooth, currently we're drawing out a single tooth. However, if I were to go to the stroke menu and go to curve and turn on curve mode, I can draw these teeth along a curve like this. However, you notice the orientation is once again incorrect. The reason for that is when we stored this insert mesh, we stored it like this. So we have the orientation right for how the tooth grows out of the surface. However, with the background as the surface of the model, we also need to imagine a curve that runs straight up and down the screen. So if we want these to draw correctly along a curve, we need to store them in this orientation. So they're running along the curve face out. So I'll go to Brush, Create Insert Mesh, and let's just append this one. So this one is ready for use with the curve brush. So if I go to Stroke, make sure curve mode is turned on, and then we draw along a curve, we'll get teeth oriented correctly, like this. So let's go back to our creature's mouth, and we'll create another proxy mesh. We'll just select the body, go to Subtool and Duplicate, go to Geometry, and just step down a few subdivision levels, delete lower, delete higher, go to Solo mode, and we'll hide everything but the mouth, and go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. So now let's say we want to create a nice row of teeth along the inside of the mouth here. I have this tooth selected. Under Stroke, I have curve mode turned on. So if I click and drag, you see we get these teeth running along this curve. So I can adjust this curve by clicking and dragging it. And then if I want to change the depth, I go to Brush, Depth, bring the depth slider down, and then just click the curve, and the teeth will update their depth, just like that. So I'll tap somewhere off the model to get rid of the curve, and then I can always take the Move brush if I like, and maybe do a little bit of tweaking asymmetrically using the Move brush. And there we have our first row of teeth. Now, let's say I want these teeth to change size along the curve. So I'm going to go back to my tooth, I'll go to the stroke menu and I will open up curve modifiers. I'll go to size and open up curve fall off. Now I'm going to bring this start point up. This is the size of the teeth at the first beginning of the curve. This is the size of the teeth at the end of the curve. And then if I click in the middle and bring this point up, I can make the teeth get larger and then get smaller again. So let's take a look at that in action. I'll turn my draw size down and I'll draw a new row of teeth right here. And here you see it draws those teeth again, but they go from small to large to small. Go back to brush, turn our depth control down, and let's click that curve to make them embed a little bit more in the body. Tap somewhere off the model. Actually, let's turn on X symmetry. Let's adjust that curve. And now we'll get 2 rows of teeth. Tap somewhere off the model to get rid of our curve, and then clear the mask. So now I have these 2 rows of teeth that were created using insert mesh along a curve. Let's hide the head by just Control-Shift clicking on it twice. Go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. Now if we turn off solo mode, you see that we've got those extra rows of teeth added into the inner mouth there, and that's looking particularly wicked. Now let's take a look at how we can create an insert multi-mesh brush from a Z-tool with multiple subtools. Here I have a Z-tool of a human skeleton, and inside the Z-tool I have various subtools for the different bones. If I turn on solo mode, you can see I have scapulas, I have the humerus, I have the skull, the hyoid bone, I have the bones of the feet. Come down here, we've got individual teeth, rib cage, pelvis. Anytime I have a Z-tool with multiple subtools, I can simply go to Brush, Create, and select Create Insert Multi-Mesh, and that will automatically create an Insert Multi-Mesh brush based on those subtools. So here if I want to insert a skull, I select the skull. Let's go ahead and select a mesh that doesn't have subdivision levels, and I can insert a skull. Go to scapulas, I can insert scapulas. I quite like inserting rib cages here, so let's turn on our X symmetry. We can insert rib cages and make some very disturbing, macabre rib cage art. So anytime I have a Z-tool with multiple subtools, I can automatically turn those subtools into insert meshes, which is really handy. If you've got a whole bunch of various bits and bobs that you've modeled over the years, you can put them together into a single subtool and then make an insert mesh brush from them. One thing that I will point out is anytime you've got this type of brush, you need to make sure that your individual insert meshes are not too dense, because right now I'm already at 3 million polygons with those insert meshes. So you might find it beneficial to go in and decimate your parts using Decimation Master before you create an insert mesh brush from them. If you want to learn more about Decimation Master, there is a separate video where we talk just about Decimation Master. So in addition to just a standard insert mesh brush or insert along a curve, there is another type of brush which is very, very useful, and those are called tripart brushes. If I go to B for brush, I for insert, you'll find that there's a brush called IMM Zipper. Now if I select IMM Zipper and then click and drag, this is a curve-based brush, and you see what this does is it draws a zipper along a curve. Now you'll notice there are 3 polygroups to this. There's a polygroup for the beginning of the curve, which is the zipper pull. There is a polygroup for the teeth of the zipper, and this is actually a repeating mesh. And there's a polygroup for the end of the zipper. And if I go to the brush menu and I go to samples, not samples, go to modifiers. You see this is a tripart brush. It has tripart turned on. Now there's also the option to weld points, but because this doesn't need its points welded, we don't use that. However, I'm going to show you how to make a brush like this, which is an O-ring, a continuous leather strap, and then a terminating O-ring. So let's take a look at how we do that. I'm just going to start with a polystar. I'm going to go to the gizmo gear, and I'm going to change this to a polycube. The default resolution is just fine. I'm going to scale this in the Z-axis, and I'm going to scale it in the X-axis. Now I am going to Control, click and drag to duplicate this. I'm going to bring this forward, and I'm going to scale it in Y and scale it in X. Now I'm going to append another polystar. I'll select that polystar. Let's turn off solo, and we'll turn this into ring 3D. We'll bring this over here, bring it forward. This is going to be our O-ring at the end of each strap. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's select this mesh here, and I'll just go to the Move brush, and we'll just scooch this strap so it feels like it's conforming around the inside of that ring. We can maybe even pull these faces down just a little bit. So there we go. Now I will select that ring. I will go to Deformation. I will mirror it across the x-axis. Actually, we need to duplicate it first. So I'll go to Subtool, Duplicate, Deformation, Mirror across the x-axis. That gives us a new one of those. Let's select our leather strap here and clear the mask, and we'll go ahead and duplicate that. I'll go to Subtool, Duplicate, and we'll do the same thing. I'm just going to go to Deformation and mirror that across the x-axis. Now, I don't need two of the strap itself, so I will go to Polygroups, Auto Group, and I'm going to delete that extra strap area by going to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. So now I've got these subtools, and I actually want these all grouped together. So I'm going to go to the top of the list here and click Merge, Merge Down, and just click Always OK. I'm going to merge all of these down into one subtool. Now the way this works is we need 3 separate polygroups for the tripart brush to work. I am going to isolate everything but this first section. This will be the first mesh that's drawn along my curve. I will go to Polygroups, Group Visible. Now I will invert that mask, and I'm going to hide these faces. Make sure that I get these faces here. There we go. So I get the center faces of my strap. You see, I've hidden everything but those center faces. I'm going to click Group Visible. Now I've got 2 polygroups and then these extra bits here, which are all polygrouped separately. So I'm going to hide these 2 and then Group Visible for these. So now I have 3 polygroups. I have the Start polygroup, which will be the O-ring and the strap. I have this polygroup, which will be duplicated along the length of the curve, and then this polygroup, which will be drawn at the end of the curve. Now we're going to store this as an insert mesh brush. So remember, we want to store it at the correct orientation. The curve runs straight up and down the screen, and the background is the surface of the model. So I will go to Brush, Create, Create Insert Mesh, New. So I now have a new insert mesh brush. I will go to Stroke, turn on Curve Mode, and now I'm going to draw this along a curve. And you see, because it has 3 polygroups, ZBrush is smart enough to know if we go to Samples to turn, not Samples, always do that. Go to Modifiers. ZBrush is smart enough to know to turn on triparts. But you notice that the strap is not welding, so I need to turn on Weld Points. Just tap the curve, and now it's automatically going to weld those points along the length of that curve. So now I can easily create this type of strap with a continuous curve duplicating that leather band with the 2 O-rings on either side. If I go back to a polysphere, and because it's an insert mesh brush, we need to delete our lower subdivision levels. So let's delete those. Let's zoom into this, and then we'll take this curve and we can draw it along the surface like this. Or a really great trick, if you're trying to put a costume detail on someone, start drawing your curve and then press and hold the Shift key. And that will create this ring that wraps that stroke along that surface. So you can very easily put a belt or a strap on someone. Now, of course, if you wanted to smooth this, you could just turn on dynamic subdivision levels. And that will give you a smooth on that curve. So now you can see what this is going to look like once it's actually smoothed. Because remember, you can't use subdivision levels with an insert mesh brush. You have to then use dynamic subdivision levels until such point that you want to bake them down. You do that by going to Geometry, Dynamic Subdivision Levels, and apply them. If you want to learn more about dynamic subdivision levels, we talk about it again in the video on ZModeler. So here you can see we've actually baked this down with subdivision levels. Now, the insert mesh brushes are incredibly powerful. There's another chapter where we talk specifically about using insert mesh brushes with Dynamesh to create entire characters using them. Also the curve brushes, as well as more details on using the insert mesh brushes to add mechanical details. But I wanted to create a separate standalone chapter where we just talk about how to create the different types of insert meshes and how to create them using subtools and how to create them using tripart brushes. So I hope you found this video helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next chapter. Thanks for watching.